If you have children who have reached 8 to 10, you either have or you are very shortly to enjoy the experience of encountering the best lawyers on the planet. You will, or have, found yourself in a situation where you thought you entered the room as the intelligent creature, and you find yourself looking around going, wait, just what happened? I think I lost that discussion. Because they are the T-Rexes of Jurassic Park, poking the fence, finding the weaknesses and getting it out and escaping. And once they do, there is pandemonium and carnage. And very shortly, you and your wife are huddled in the kitchen in fear, trying not to move because you know they sense fear. My name is Andrew Green. This is the Idea Collision. We're going to put a bunch of stuff together. Sometimes humorous metaphors even will be the launching point for a serious application that benefits us, which is what we're driving for. We have been speaking of American greatness, and you may agree or disagree with the premise, but we've tried to define it in such a way that we can understand it and agree in certain ways that greatness is not economic prosperity, it's not technological advances, even if those things do come while America's great. Really, America's greatness, or any country's greatness, is defined through having a moral compass. And moral compasses tend to lead to other great things. We've also tried to define it not in the sense of, one of the things that people reject the idea over is because it's not perfect or nearly perfect, then it's not great. We've tried to not define it as a point in time, but as this process, even as our founding fathers understood it, that they were searching for a more perfect union, some type of a process where we were pursuing our happiness, not necessarily attaining it, but just the freedom to try to pursue it as best as we can. And ultimately, great organizations, you can think about great organizations that no longer exist. And they stop existing for a number of reasons. Like some of them are just badly managed, and others, go out of existence because like the industry is no longer relevant. Like we don't have milkmen today. But a lot of things that disappear don't need to disappear. They disappear because they cease to be relevant through forgetting their founding. They're great. They could be potentially great, but those who run it forget the founding. Right? Like Harley Davidson is a great example of this. I'm like 20 miles from Milwaukee. Harley Davidson is in this process right now. They've hired a CEO. I don't even know if he's still the CEO or if they've canned him yet. But I think he's from like Berlin. And he's got this European identity, obviously, and he's tried to bring that to like this really, I'm trying to not use epithets, but very rural type American rugged, that type of identity that goes along with what Harley Davidson is and has always represented. And it's like, listen, the people that like Harley Davidson are not interested in a weenie e-bike. I'm sorry. That is not going to fly. You're just going to hemorrhage, dollars. And they are. Now, the good news for Harley Davidson is it seems like they're trying to make some moves, but I don't know. But what makes America great to whatever extent it is? And a lot of times, those who reject that premise hear it the wrong way. They hear us talking about American greatness, and we think we're talking about Americans being great, as though somehow the individuals are genetically superior, which is obviously kind of an idea from another country in our recent past. And that's not what is meant by American greatness. The idea is that the founding is great. The concept of America, the experiment, is great. Jewish people had an idea that they were greater than everybody else. And God had to remind them, listen, you are great because I chose you. I didn't choose you because you're great. In other words, I gave you advantages. I gave you a lot of benefits. And it is these things that I gave you that turned you into the people you are and made you different from other people. The reason I did so is because eventually I want to share that with everybody, but I want you to be the example of what makes things great. I want you to be the ones that make it attractive to other people. But eventually it's going to belong to everybody. And so, many of these same ideas are embedded into the founding of our country. And so these benefits have made the United States great. So it comes down to really two documents. Now, the most famous statement in, our American ideal is the opening of the Declaration of Independence, which, is a longer paragraph, but it basically says that, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That idea is our ethos, what we call our ethos, our identity. And the Constitution comes along, and it doesn't have a lot of great famous statements. In fact, there's longer expositions of concepts and structure. In fact, some of the things that are famous, we know more by the numbers. We can say, freedom of speech and things like that, but we just go First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fifth Amendment. We just do that. We just throw numbers at it because it's easy. It's easier shorthand. But the Constitution comes along and it tries to define how we're going to achieve the Declaration of Independence, that pursuit of happiness. And it comes along with a couple of ideas, many ideas, but basically into two. First of all is we're going to give humans freedom, and we're going to limit the government rather than the other way around. And the second thing is that within the government, we're going to limit the different parts of government from infringing on the rights of the other part of government. Because if we have one part of government that gets to run amok, they're going to take over the whole thing, and pretty soon they're not going to stop there, but they are then going to take away from the rights of the individual, and it's going to be flipped upside down. So all these things are important. And we live in a society where that is ceasing to be the case. It is not these documents, really, in reality, that is made us successful to whatever degree we're successful. It is, it's the trust that we have in these founding documents and that we've had for 249 years. Next year's our 250th anniversary. If we want to make it much further, we're going to have to start trusting our founding documents. But let me give you some examples of not trusting our founding documents. You might react to some of these negatively. It depends on where you stand. But these are factual. And some of these affect both sides. So at some point, you'll have to say, yeah, that was, at some point you'll agree. But when we look at elections, for example, that's a hot topic. Oh, elections. Listen, since 2000, every one of our elections, except for just a small couple, have been protested by one of the two parties. Both sides have had problems with our elections. As the leader of the free world, we really shouldn't have multiple elections that are challenged by the other side. That puts us down in the rankings among Western civilized countries. But even forgetting that, like just as a factual observation, we are at a point right now for the last several years where from point A, the beginning of the ballot process where they're printed, to the end of, okay, there's a president, we've never had like a time period where like our ballots from beginning to end have more points of time in them where there's no supervision, where there's no chain of custody that's reliable. Like you could throw them in a ballot box in the middle of the street somewhere. Like tell me there's no room for problems there. Or they're transferred randomly in the middle of night somewhere. Like even if nothing bad happens, it's hard to trust the system. It's like that does not look like we're doing due diligence with our system. We have a point in time now where a president was attempted, like this is not deniable. Multiple states tried to remove a president from being elected. Now, this is not the first time something similar happened. We fought a war. A lot of people think, the Civil War was fought over slavery. Well, that was the main topic, I suppose. But what touched it off was the election of a president and disagreement over the election of a president. And whether or not Abraham Lincoln should be able to become president. And so they said, we're taking our ball and going home. So we've had this discussion before. We have a irrefutable evidence now, and more each day just about, that our chief investigative branches of, or not branches, but our chief investigative bureaus, our CIA and FBI, worked in concert with various groups and organizations to make up evidence out of thin air to try to prosecute and imprison a candidate for president. Like we're reaching the point where government officials are no longer trusting the system. We're now at a point where judges are doing things that they are legally forbidden to do, both in law and in directly worded Supreme Court decisions from the past, which state, listen, this is a duty of the presidents. It's not even open to judicial review. Not open to judicial review means that it's not even like if a judge is sitting in his, in his courtroom and in comes some people, we have a lawsuit against this group. What's the lawsuit? The president, we want you to stop the president from doing this particular activity. Now, certain things are within their purview, but certain things have been decided. This is an executive branch decision exclusively, and a judge can't even hear the case. Per that decision, the judge is supposed to hear him say that, and it's called dismissing that case with prejudice, meaning it gets kicked out of court. And if you try to bring it again, you can be cited for like contempt of court. Like you can't ever even walk in the courtroom with that case again. That's how, but we have hundreds of judges now who are not only allowing the case to proceed, but they're siding with the plaintiffs. And now they're acting basically as 200 or 300 presidents instead of, I think the word that everybody likes to hear today or use today is unelected bureaucrats. When you have a government that doesn't keep its bounds, you will have a populace that will follow. And so we have people that are firebombing private enterprises because they want to protest something. And it's not a protest, that's called terrorism. And we have public figures laughing at it, encouraging it, and supporting it. We have a man who assassinated in broad daylight, filmed it. A CEO of a company, an innocent individual, and that man going to trial is now a cult hero among millions of people. Not thousands, millions of people. We're losing the trust in our founding documents. What's going to happen is people don't understand this. We're going to get to a point in our country where a man becomes president and he's going to realize that he has a military. And the Supreme Court is going to tell him to do something and he's going to say no because he doesn't trust the founding. And I know you think that is, and you may be right. But let me assure you, it's already happened multiple times. In 2023, the Supreme Court said, you might have good intentions, but you can't just arbitrarily forgive student debt. There are multiple precedents, I'm not a lawyer, for which the Constitution prevents that. Within less than a week, Joseph Biden said, the Supreme Court tried to block me, but they did not stop me. And he continued on. What are they going to do? Supreme Court has no power, I don't believe. They don't have like a police force to go arrest Joe Biden and throw him in prison. At some point in time, Joe Biden has to trust the system and say, the Supreme Court said so, hands off. In 1861, I believe, Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and arrested the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So it's happened before. Great men and not great men alike, from beginning to end, have taken more power because it's tempting to, and it's tempting to want to run the United States as a king. That was temporary, and Abraham Lincoln backed off. And had he not, I don't believe we would be a country today. I believe he would have lost the North and permanently the South. And so we have to understand that a country only survives on the honor system. Any organization survives on the honor system. Those who claim Christianity, much the same, in order to maintain Christian greatness, must trust the founding document. But you will hear phrases like, it's just written by man, it's full of discrepancies. Its ideas are inspired, but sometimes it's full of historical inaccurate statements. It's got some contradictions in it. It's metaphorically true. And there's a number of reasons. These are not statements of critics of the Bible. These are statements of people who stand behind pulpits. And they go against the claims of this document. This document claims that it is breathed out by God. Its words are directly from the mouth of God. That no prophecy of Scripture was inspired by man, but holy men spoke as they were moved along by the Spirit of God. Once we erode the perfection of this book, we cease to have any premise to believe any part of it. One of the most, just as an example, one of the most attacked portions of this from without and from within the church are Genesis 1 through 3, which detail creation, and most specifically the creation of man, the origin of man's story. And here's the problem, is if you erode that story, you erode the greatest story in the book. Because is it any harder for God to create a living body from dirt than it is to raise a body from the dead? It's the same story. So if you discount Genesis 1 from being possible, then you have no basis for believing the resurrection story, which is the point of the whole thing. And for which Paul himself said, listen, if that's not true, if we can't trust that story, then we are the dumbest people on the planet. We get up, we go and sing our songs, we listen to stories, we celebrate all sorts of things together based on this story. We live our lives, we make decisions, we make sacrifices based on believing in this story. And if it's not true, we did that for absolutely nothing. And all because of self-serving conclusions, because primarily the result is, or the motivation is, I don't want to do this thing, or I want to do this thing. The Bible tells me that I should or shouldn't. The opposite. And so I'm just going to rationalize this section away so I can do what I want. And there's a statement, excuse me, that I'll quote it and then I'll paraphrase it. But he says, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows is what he will reap," which basically works out like this. Don't kid yourself. You're not really insulting God. Whatever you begin with is what you're going to get out of it. Right? People criticize the Bible and they think that they're having a great victory over God. They think they're winning. God's not the one losing here. Because eventually your life is the decisions you make are going to be based and premised upon the ideas you have. And if eventually it's going to be borne out, the results will show what you were making. And your teaching, whatever your ideas are, it's going to be revealed by the people you teach, the things you attempt to build. Because if you teach an inferior gospel, the people that you teach it to will not trust the founding documents as they were and will live a life accordingly. So this week I hope that you go out there and re-examine the founding documents. We're not perfect. We're flawed people. The church is flawed insofar as we look at the membership of it. It's a great organization, though. And its founding, unlike the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, it is a perfect document. I pray that you go out and renew your trust in that document. And until next week, my name is Andrew Green. This is The Idea Collision.